So, welcome everyone. This is Patricia Kales, and I'm going to just give a brief introduction. Patricia called, and I was fortunate enough to pick up the call. We did not know each other before that. She found about Bethlehem Farm just weeks or so before that. So we ended up having about a 25-30 minute conversation, and through that conversation all the time I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is certainly someone I need to bring to the farm as a speaker. And I won't go into details why. You'll understand why I thought that as she speaks to us. Patricia lives in a town called Ramp, which is 10 point some miles straight across the mountain. And Patricia actually drove straight across the mountain because she's lived here her whole life and she knows how to get here. So it took her about 30 minutes to do so.
Can I say some people have been to Ramp?
Well, there's a story about that. So let me, and I'll let Patricia tell that story because it's quite interesting and funny, actually. Yeah. But that's one of her many stories she'll be speaking of. So with that, Patricia, thank you very much for coming. Patricia is also very interested in understanding what we do here relative to gardening and such. She wants to experience as much as she can in her life. At this point, she just built a greenhouse, wants to understand how to do that successfully. And I'm forecasting and predicting we're going to have a long relationship between Patricia and the farm. So, thank you for coming. I'll leave it to you at this point.
I appreciate the opportunity to be able to meet every one of you and to be able to explore such a beautiful place on top of this mountain. It is absolutely heavenly. The experience that he's talking about down at Ramp, there's probably a couple here that got lost a few days ago. And so you was at my niece's house, actually. And so she calls me up and says, Momo, I got to get a shower. I got something funny to tell you. And I said, okay. So she comes down and she starts talking about this couple that has gotten distracted from their route going to the Bethlehem farm. And I'm sitting there, I've made the appointment with Mr. Steve, and I'm thinking, is this a coincidence or what? And so she rears up on the end of her chair and says, stop. I said, no, really, I am going there Wednesday evening and meet all the people at Bethlehem Farm. So she is just wiped out. She says, you just got it too much. So that my name is Patricia, and I am a very diverse person. I'm spastic. I'm here, there, and everywhere. I want to enjoy life every day. I want happiness, love, and peace in my life, and I find that here just by being here. I arrived early. I'm always early. I don't want to be late. Don't like to be late. And my host, Mr. Steve, I said, may I just sit in a rocking chair somewhere? I'll be comfortable. And he said, works for me. That's my kind of people. But anyhow, I'm going to tell you, I have been divinely blessed because I was raised by my grandmother being Lola Alice Dick, and her brother, William Earl, at Ramp. And if you're ever up through from Sandstone 5 miles, you'll see a 2-story rustic farmhouse that has been there over 200 years. In the living room, the walls are hand planed and hand cut and grooved yellow lin and poplar boards. I only painted those boards. I had hoped to just clean the boards, but I couldn't. And so what I did was I painted them, but you can still see the hand planing of the boards. It's really neat to see that. The house was built approximately 1883-84 by John Dick and David Dick, 2 brothers that came over from, their ancestors came, and they came from England. They got a land grant off of a Mr. Halloway on a boat. And so they settled in Summers County, Greenbrier County at the time, before Summers County had their own courthouse. The shingles was on the house because the house was before the tin was made. But now we have a tin roof on it because tin wasn't made until 1917. The well there was hand dug, 27 feet deep. Always plenty of water though. And we drew the water as a child. This is one of my favorite things that my grandmother was about the most laid-back person that you could ever meet. There was a well porch, and it was a square, maybe a 10 by 12 square, and the well casing was right in the middle of that. There was a post over on the side, which the well bucket hung on. Has anybody ever seen a well bucket? I meant to bring one today, and I just didn't, but hey, we got one we'll show you later. But anyhow, we would draw water with that well bucket up out of that well. We would put 2 buckets of water on a cabinet every night before we went to bed, ready for the next morning. But the privilege that I had was that I was able to go into the creek and I could catch minnows. And I would catch minnows approximately this long. We called them horny head minnows. They had little white horns on their head. But my grandmother, being the gracious, humble woman that she was so gracious to allow me to wash those minnows, pulling that well water up and washing them in a pan and cleaning them up. And then she would fry those teeny little minnows for me and allow me to eat those. So, you think, well, that wasn't so much. But you're talking about a girl that's out here just catching crawdads and minnows, and I mean, that was my entertainment. You know what I'm saying? We didn't have all this loose stuff, and I was well content with catching them crawdads. And still, children come. I just had some people to come the other day, and the little boys, I said, you can take your shoes and socks off, and they were so reluctant to take their shoes and socks off. But after a while, they learned it was the right thing to do. But anyhow, it's important for us to realize our heritage, and that's the reason I'm here today. West Virginia these mountains are full of people that has, so many gifts of quality. One of my friends is 81 years old, and she just knitted me a sweater, and I felt very humbled when she handed me that sweater as a gift. But anyhow, my grandmother's name was Lola Alice. First thing I always want to say about her is her unconditional love. I never heard her use a curse word. I'm 65. She died in 1990 at 77. Never heard her use a curse word at all. Never saw her angry but one time. And the thing of it is, there were 7 of us kids in our family, but she raised me and my older sister there as my father went to Ohio to work. You never was, I grew up thinking that I could do anything I wanted to. If I had the thought, I could do it. I was never character assassinated. I was never, you need to think about that. We were allowed to grow up, experience it. If we had an accident, we had an accident. If we made a mess, we made a mess. It wasn't like, critical thing here. But the only other thing that I want to say here, her daddy and her had an open door policy. The open door policy meant you could be drunk, neighborhood drunk or whatever. Moonshine flows everywhere in West Virginia, and everybody knows that. And it's okay. I use it for medicinal purposes, but I don't overuse it. But the thing of it is that anybody could come, and as long as they weren't rude or ugly, they were welcome to stay all night. They were welcome to eat whatever she had, whether it was brown beans, cornbread, biscuits, cornbread, whatever she had, you could have a portion of that. There was never a question of how much food was in the house. There was always enough for everybody. And that is a valuable thing, because back in the day, there wasn't freezers. It was only canned things in the cupboard and things. So, but she never talked about what she did not have as far as groceries or any other thing goes. And the next thing I would want to say is the contentment that she had. We grew up with no water in the house, no bathroom in the house, and we cooked on a wood stove. Now, until I was 12 years old, she cooked on that wood stove when a neighbor gave her a used electric stove. And another neighbor came and wired up one of them little screw-in fuses. But anyhow, I don't know how it all worked, but it worked. But the thing that we would do would be we would get our own wood for that cook stove. My Uncle Billy, we called him Uncle Billy, and that was being, he sawed the wood with a cross-cut saw that I have on the wall in my house. Now, my niece is an artist, and she can paint all kinds of pictures on that. And she's offered, and she's painted me other saws, but I said, no, please don't paint that one. When I look at that one, I've got all kinds of pictures in my mind. So we used a crosscut saw to cut trees up on a sawhorse, and my Uncle Billy would use a double-bladed axe to go cut a tree down, and he would come home, and he was a huge man, and he would come with the tree on his shoulder in to the woodshed, and we would cut that tree up. And then I had my own personal little wheelbarrow, wooden wheelbarrow, and I felt like that I was like, I could have been the queen of ranch for all that. I had my own wheelbarrow. So we would put the wood on there, and I would make pig pens where you would cross the wood, and he was keeping me busy and out of trouble, now I know. But back then, I was doing a great job for the wood to air. But then we would take it around back and put it in the wood box. And so then the next morning, they would rise early, and every morning of our life we had homemade biscuits. Grandma, I can still see her flipping that dough, making them biscuits. Homemade biscuits and gravy and eggs because we had our own chickens. And then we had what was called side meat, which was a fat slab of bacon off of the hog. Sometimes not. But we always had breakfast every morning. And I've never been a breakfast person, but I had to get up anyway and go to breakfast. So anyhow, we did breakfast, but I can say that I was really happy about the breakfast because the wood that I helped get in helped heat the stove. So we let the oven door down whenever the cooking was done so that it would let heat out into the house. But that wheelbarrow made me feel very, very, very special. And so the warming closet on that wood stove, I saw you have a wood stove. Well, that warming closet on her stove, she would put the food in there, and like if somebody came by, she had food ready. And so it stayed there, and when us kids got done eating, we always had to sweep the kitchen, and we had to wash the dishes. So as soon as we got all that done, we were gone to the creek, to the woods, wherever we wanted to go. But when we come in, there was always a pot of brown beans on the back side of that cook stove, cornbread and fried potatoes, and maybe a biscuit or whatever might have been there for breakfast. But we were very well content, very much loved, and we were never, ever, ever criticized. And I have to keep saying that because I hear parents today, don't do that, you're gonna fall, or don't do that. No, they won't fall and they won't break. They're okay. They got to learn. That's how I feel, my personal thing. But every day we had our lunch and our suppers, brown beans and fried potatoes and cornbread. One day I come home from school. My grandmother was not one to make sweets, but lo and behold, I come home and there was a pumpkin pie on the old Hoosier cabinet. Well, I thought, whoa. Really? So I'm over there inspecting because I'm not thinking this is going to be worth, so much. Because she could make jams and jellies and all that stuff, but not desserts. That just didn't happen at our house too often. Well, guess what? Pumpkin pie is still my favorite pie today. It was absolutely awesome, and we loved it, and I still love pumpkin pie today. And we didn't have meat through the week so often, but on Sundays, we always tried to have fried chicken or boiled chicken or chicken because we had our own chickens, So I've been plucking chickens all my life. I told one of my neighbors, I said, I have been plucking chickens as soon as I can carry the axe or a hatchet to the chop block, I can clean a chicken. Hey, we had a contest one time at my house to see who could pluck a chicken the quickest. And I was right in there, let me tell you. All right, but the gardens were mud. And I can still hear my grandmother's hoe clanging in the rocks. My soil there is very rocky. We had no tillers. We had no tractors. A neighbor came and plowed the field up, and then we dug and shoveled and did whatever. But I can sit here, and if you were working, you can just hear that clanging of those rocks with that hoe. I'm very blessed now. I have a tiller on the back of a tractor, which makes the soil so soft. I mean, you walk in it barefooted, and it's awesome. I have a rototiller that I can go between my rows with. And so every time I do my garden, I think about my grandmother. She's probably saying, wow, girl, you got it made. I dug with a hoe and, whatever. And now here you are sitting down drinking a cup of tea. And why don't you, so you see where we come from. But the canning and the preserving was always a must. Now, A lot of people want to pressure can all their stuff, and I do that myself. But I still, for the essence of my grandmother, I have a tub out back on a fire pit, and I can 22 quarts of beans or 22 quarts of tomatoes on that open fire. Cold packing is what we call it, because it's just the way she did it. You know, so I keep that memory alive, and I'll have friends over and we'll can beans or whatever. And we were always picking berries or apples, and after the meals and the stuff was left over, we always had to sweep. And I have to keep iterating that because we have to sweep. And you know, I knew we'd get crumbs on the floor, but really every meal we have to sweep. But anyway, so we're going to move on now to this. I don't know if any of you all have eaten groundhog before, but as I was a child, I see them definitely not. I hope I get to cook you a groundhog someday. This big, I had a little black dog, and this dog, when I was a young girl, maybe 13, maybe 14, he treated a groundhog up in the field above us. And so me and my Uncle Billy went up, and my grandmother doesn't have a gun in the house, okay? So we're throwing rocks at this groundhog trying to get him out of the tree. And so finally we get him out of the tree. So we're spinning the groundhog and we're doing all this, and all this time I'm huffing and puffing, and I'm just getting ready to go to the house and tell my grandma this wonderful story that we need a gun. So, you know, we need to go hunting for these groundhogs instead of just letting the dog tree them. So guess what? My neighbor that I had been visiting with my friend, her dad had a shooting match. Well, I started telling the story about I need a gun, you know. 14 years old, can you imagine talking to an adult that you need a gun? I mean, he's thinking, yeah, right. Well, guess what? Again, I prevailed, and my grandmother did get the gun from him. It was a little 22, a wee little short barrel, and you couldn't get the broadside of a barn with it. I don't know what was wrong with that sight on the front of it, but anyhow, I would shoot enough till I finally got the groundhog out. But I convinced my grandmother that I needed a shotgun. So she went to Sears and Roebuck and bought me a 20-gauge shotgun, the first store-bought gun I ever had, and I still have it today. And I love hunting squirrels. But she allowed me to get those guns, and it was not her cup of tea, but I could show her I could put meat on the table. So I'm hunting outside. So there we go. There was I had to convince her, which was not an easy thing to do. Washing our clothes. Now, we wash our clothes on a wringer washer. Y'all probably got one here. No? No? Okay. Well, anyhow, there's a creek runs down by my house, and there's another one. There's two creeks come together where I live. And so the water had to be carried from the creek in order to put it in the tub and the washing machine to wash clothes. And so I carried the water from the creek. All of us did, but mostly I was the one that was there. So we carried that, and we washed in the wringer washer on the back porch, and there's a tub that's set behind the wringer washer as the rinsing tub. And we rinsed them, and we hung them out on the outside line, similar to what you all do. But in the winter time, we heated the water on the wood stove, and then we hung our clothes upstairs, like you all got going on in here. But we had a bedroom and a hall upstairs that we hung them in. So drying the clothes was something to do back in the day, because when we hung them outside, they were just freeze, you know. But we always made our homemade live soap, and she would shave the live soap into that water, and that was our washing powder that we washed our clothes with. Summertime was always a good time because carrying the water wasn't a bad thing. In the wintertime, it wasn't so nice to carry that water. So when we come home from school, I took my school clothes off and hung them up because they weren't dirty, and I was going to wear them another time. We had to do that to keep from doing all the washing. But now, for the fun thing that we did was milking the cow. Another event where being with my Uncle Billy made me feel like that I was the queen of Ramp again. We had the milk cow, and we had a calf. And we had the barn, and the calf stayed in a little stall over here. And there was a little wooden door that would open, and you let the calf in to mother to get the milk after we got the milk, what we were going to get. And so I was the one that got to open that little door and let that calf in. And I just felt like, you know, that I was open the gate, you know. I was the gate opener, so hey, there we go. But having our own milk and our own butter allowed the neighbors to come, and they would come and eat supper with us. And lots of times we just had cornbread and buttermilk, or cornbread and sweet milk, you know, or cornbread with a hot butter on it, warm butter on the cornbread. So it was a lot of good fellowshipping that brought us together. And then not everybody had a milk cow there, and so Grandma was always giving the milk away and the butter, which is, and I still have her churn today, sitting in the kitchen. But the other thing that was all of my wonderful things to do was to go to milk the cow, go to the wood, catch those crawdads and catch those minnows. And then in the fall, what I really, really liked to do was to gather walnuts. And the squirrels probably hated me because I would gather just big mounds of walnuts, and I would haul those. My sister was kind of ashamed of me because I would get that stain on my hands. And, you know, we didn't have a whole lot of bleach, and if we did, I wasn't going to get bleach my hands. But the walnuts were so wonderful to eat. And I'd take all that hull off, and then we would dry them. And then in the wintertime, on the old warm morning stove in the living room, here you go again, an unconditional love of a grandmother. And I would bring a rock from the creek, and I would be cracking those walnuts right there in that living room. And you know, if you've ever cracked a walnut, they never stay, all the holes. So I'd have to sweep up, get them holes up. But she never come down on my case because I missed some or she stepped on one. I never heard anything at all about that. Another thing that back in the day, my family did not get to come in for a Christmas one year. And so I was the one that got to decorate the Christmas tree. So I, to this day, honor my grandmother because God helped that tree. We got to gather the tree, and then she would get the ornaments, and she'd put that little hangy thing on there, and I decorated that as a child, maybe his age. And you know what? To this day, and I've tried to really think about it in times past, I never did see her move or rearrange anything on that tree. And I'm sure she had to, but she did, because she would not hurt my feelings over that tree. So to me, that unconditional love is like it's a merit, a garret that I hold, or a stone that I carry with me all the time. And when I see a child and I think, let's just leave them alone. Just leave them alone. They are so angels among us. I love children. I love to hear their laughter. I love to hear their play. But most of all, I love to watch them experiment and learn about what they are working with. And so the walnuts were one of my favorite things, and then cracking the walnuts in my grandmother's living room and her laying on the couch. She was a very heavy lady, and she would just lay up on her side on the couch and just watch me do whatever. I mean, you know, just whatever I was into at that moment. And like I'm telling you, my family always says, you know, let's just keep her busy because she's going to find something for all of us to do. That's just the way I am. I love to do and experience different things. And so it's been my great privilege to be here with you today. And I know that each one of you all have got a story of your own. And I really thank you for your attention to listen to mine. And one day I will be back, and maybe we'll be sewing, because I quilt, I can, I just run the roads. I go to Georgia hog hunting. I love going hog hunting in the nighttime. I was spotlighting when spotlighting wasn't legal, you guys. But in Georgia, it's legal to use the light. So anyhow, we used to spotlight rabbits, and I loved it. We knew it was illegal, but they made a great dinner for the next day. you know, those animals were made for us to eat. You know, that's what I've always felt about it growing up, and that's how I still feel about it. God forgive me. But so it's wonderful to share my experience with you. And if you're ever down through Ramp, it's just a little one road. It's a nobody's place, and there's a lot of just simple people. But stop by and see me. You can't miss me. I'm a 2-story farmhouse on the right-hand side of number 7, route number 7. Pull in the driveway, and we'll have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and something, and we'll certainly have a visit. So at this time, I appreciate your attention. I hope to get to meet all of you again someday. So Mr. Steve can have it for now. Thank you for listening to my story.
The will.
The will.
Yes. Can you?
Yes, Steve has a copy of my grandmother Sarah's will. Her son to Hayes, not this one, but the others, I have another picture of him. Anyway, her son, he has a copy of that whenever she made her will to her son, she put in there that there would be no manual labor, and that she was to be respectfully buried and all of her just debts paid, and that her two sons, other sons, were to live there at the home place. There were like 9 of those children in that family. And so these two sons were to make their home with Grandpa Hayes, or this will is null and void. And that is exact words that she uses. And when you read about that, you'll listen to what she, in our other paperwork we found in the trunk, she got really mad at a neighbor one time because his cow got into her fodder and tore her fodder down, her corn stalks down. So she was a very adamant, strong-minded woman. So I'm thinking, yep, I got some of that blood. Yep, so I'm going out here in a blaze, yes. But the will is very important because it really comes down in like 9 generations of that farm there. And so we're just trying to maintain it and make it like you all could come and visit, passing by, because that's the way the open door policy was for Hayes Dick and David Dick and Sarah Dick. Anybody got any questions?
I have another one. You talk about you make certain medicines.
Yes. All the herbs that you see, we make salves for your skin irritations. You know, mullein grows everywhere, and that's a wonderful, wonderful plant. I grow comfrey. We make comfrey salve. Next month we will start digging yellow root. Some of y'all might know what that is, and we'll start digging yellow root because yellow root is good from the time it goes in to the time it goes out. If you get COVID, drink yellow root and moonshine. It will not affect you. I'm telling you, it's the truth. Use it as medicinal. It works. A cousin of mine got COVID in Ohio, and I talked with him, and he said, I drank a pint of moonshine, and the doctor just grinned at me and said, you have the COVID, but you don't have the symptoms. He was testing positive, but he wasn't really sick. So hey, get your medicine cabinet loaded, guys. There you go. There you go.
Any questions for Patricia about what she talked about, or just in general? Again, 9 generations of history.
Oddly enough, her name is Patricia Ann Wood. That's my mom's name. So we're wondering if we're related, because her grandfather had lots of brothers and sisters, and so did mine. So
yeah, there you go.
Where did you learn your knowledge for your medicinal plants? Was that stuff that your family knew?
My grandmother, she always picked these plants, and what she did was, when she got too old to pick them, she used a cane, and we'd take a knife and a water bucket, and we would pick these things. We made tea, but she ate them. In the spring, she used herbs as a cleansing, and then she says that if people would do the cleansing herbs in the spring, we wouldn't have cancers and like that. But we picked water buckets of greens all the time, but mostly in the spring. When the poke first comes up, we would get poke and lamb's quarter and a whole bunch of stuff. But it's really important for us to remember and know all that, because I really think it's put here for our purpose, for our use. Yeah. And I don't know as much as I need to know because I was young and dumb. I didn't pay as much attention as I should have. I had to learn from a book after a while. I went camping one time and was trying to identify all kinds of herbs, and I have my book where I did that and where I found stuff at. So I have all that written down now at 65. Can't climb the mountains no more like I used to. I used to love to go squirrel hunting, and the mountains wasn't a problem. The mountains was not a problem. All day in the woods. I was squirrel hunting on this mountain up above my house one time. Wonderful, beautiful morning to be in the woods, beautiful morning. And I had like 3 layers of clothes on, you know, in the spring. It's a cool morning, but then it gets hot. So I'm taking off and wrapping around me. And I'm so thirsty, because back in those days, you didn't take bottled water with you, you didn't take anything to eat, you just went. And so, at the bottom of this mountain, I know there's a spring down here. I'm walking around this old mountain road, and I know this land, and I know there's a cold spring down there, and it's in a root, in a big old hollow tree, log. And I'm thinking, gosh, I gotta go all the way down there to get a drink of water. It's gonna be worth it to come back up. And I finally said, yeah, it's worth it. So I go down, and I chill there at that spring for a while. But yeah, and that's another thing. I really would love for each one of us to start exploring our own mountains and find all these springs. All of our old people used to go through the woods ginsenging and yellow root hunting, and they cleaned out all the springs. Now, no springs are cleaned out. No springs are cleaned out like they used to be. So we need to preserve all these mountain springs. They are very valuable assets if you have them on your property. And if you buy a piece of property, make sure and ask, does it have a mountain spring on it? Because that's quality. That's just it. That's just a bomb right there. Yeah. Yeah. Sir.
Do you still hunt with your shotgun?
Sure. Yeah.
What's the last thing you hunted?
Hogs in
Hogs.
Georgia.
In Georgia?
Yeah. Well, I hunt groundhogs all the time.
And do you have like any grandkids that you teach to hunt?
Yeah.
How many?
5. Yeah. I have a little Sadie, about this tall, and at my house she has a little 22, and it's got a little pink sling on it. And there was like 5 deer over my bean patch over across where my barn is at, and they were in like 2 weeks ago. I said, Sadie, what you gonna do about them deer over there? I said, you know, a tenderloin biscuit is smelling pretty good to me. Her dad looks at me with this look, we bow hunt, and it ain't time. So Sadie goes into the kitchen, because beside my rocking chair in the kitchen sets a 410 shotgun loaded for snakes. And then over on the other corner is Sadie's 22, and then I have a 22 Magnum. We have bear crosses over too. And so Sadie comes walking out on the back porch then, and she's done strapped on her gun, and she's ready to go and protect my bean patch. So her dad has to take her over and hold it down so she can shoot it 2 or 3 times in order to scare the deer away, you know. So she did a miraculous thing. She protected my beans. So I told her, I said, now Sadie, when you come back, it's going to be time that we can kill a deer. So I said, I'm going to come along over here. We're going to hang that deer, and yes, she will have a knife. She will help me skin that knife and take care of that meat. And yeah, we will have tenderloin biscuits. Yeah. Hey, just neighborhood kids. I teach them guns. Yes, and we have target practice at my place. And guns are a valuable asset if used right. Yeah.
You mentioned yellow root and ginseng. Is yellow root turmeric, or is it something different?
In your herb book, it'll be called golden seal. But mountain people call it yellow root, and it's got a leaf, and it's got little berries in it. I'm going next month to start gathering. Really, September is the month, but I gotta get some. I don't have any. And so when you get, it's a real splinty like root, you wash that good, and then you dry that, and you research that on your phone for medicinal. It goes back to the Indian times, but it is good for everything. Every organ in your body, it's good for that. I've drank a lot of it. It's bitter. I drink it straight. A lot of people can't drink it straight, but you can put honey in it. It's real good with that. But by all means, learn what yellow root is and learn what ginseng is. They are natural healers to your body. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, terrific. Well, Patricia, lived up to what I thought you were going to deliver. So thank you very much.
Wow.
You just
Live the little pressure.
wealth of information. No, I got that sense on the phone with our conversation, and thank you for sharing your life and your thoughts and your feelings and your wonderful childhood and wonderful life with us. We appreciate it.
Now, thank you. One thing that I would like to see you do here is to teach your children how to make the gravel shooters. We used to make gravel shooters as a child. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Slingshots? Teach these kids how to make these gravel shooters from the tree. Go find their prong in the woods and get those rubbers and split them. And one will hold and one will tie. I used to hold that for my brother. And then after I gathered up all these little smooth rocks for him to be able to shoot, they sneaked off and left me. That's what brothers do to sisters, see, in the summertime. Yeah, but let them make those gravel shooters and put up spots for them. It's a great craft for the kids to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So thank you guys for being here today with me.